Greetings, gamers. This is the beginning of Space Marines 2. It just came out. I did a 12-hour stream last night on Angel of Death difficulty over on Twitch. And these are my initial impressions, tips, combat, story, some of the bugs that you might come across. And I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as I can. Beginning with the story, it is intriguing, covers a lot of what Space Marines 1 did. So if you're coming from not playing Space Marines 1, you can definitely jump into Space Marines 2 and get most of what happened in the first game. They won't leave you out of any area. I played Space Marines 1, so maybe I'm coming from a little bit more informative side of things, but it does cover a lot of those points that happened in Titus's past. The story in this game is intriguing, has some drama, has a lot of questions, has a lot of twists and turns, conflict of interest, without going into too much depth to what the story has to play out. I want to keep it that way, so that way when this game does come out on September 9th, anybody that bought it then instead of got the advanced access version, I want them to be able to enjoy the game fully as well. As far as the art style of this game, they nailed it perfectly. The Tyranids come in swarms, they look amazing. The Warhammer 40k theme seems to be done flawlessly from my perspective. It seems like a lot of the art departments know what the hell they're doing in the 40k universe. Darktide had a great art department, still does. They still make great cosmetics. I just don't approve of how that game was released and should never have been released in such a state. But that's a different game. Back onto Space Marines 2. The environments that you come across in Space Marines 2, the swamp that you'll experience in the tutorial, which is what you're watching right now, you will see water, greenery. You can break through some of the vegetation there. Just the overall depth and clarity of the armor, the Skyhawks that they use, is immaculate. These cinematic scenes are beautiful in a very deadly way. The sound effects in this game, the squirms from the Tyranids, the intensity that the music brings, your swings, the rev of chainsword, the bolter has weight to it. You can feel that stuff in game.
Approaching Kadaku. Prepare for atmospheric entry.
Combat in this game is a little clunky from time to time, in my opinion. They don't teach you everything that you should or need to know to be very effective in combat situations. They teach you how to parry, which is one of the key points in this game, but they don't teach you or show you that you can parry almost every attack that a larger opponent has. So what you will see later in this tutorial is a larger enemy with a whip, and I'll try to demonstrate the best that I can of the parrying ability of that enemy. The small enemies of the Tyranids come in massive droves. You will get sceneries of those, and it just looks like a massive horde, like a hive mind, like the Xenos should. They do teach you a lot about your light attacks, heavy attacks, combos, such. The one thing that I found is that the dodging in this game is where it gets clunky. When an enemy throws out an unblockable attack with the orange ring and you press space, sometimes it feels like you do dodge, but you still get hit anyway. Like the immunity frames are too little, or they're not correct, or they just still hit you after, even though you do everything that you can to get out of the way. The executions in this game are the way that you are going to keep your shields up and how you are going to sustain in just about any fight. They replenish a shield every time you do one. The blue enemy, the smaller enemies, when they jump at you, they give you an immediate shield back, but they don't do it often. They're very sparing, so it kind of makes you have to look for executions or pistol shot combos. And we're coming up on the larger enemy, so I will show the parrying right here. This is the first large enemy that you face. Whip and sword, common throughout the game. And the red indicator for dodge. So you dodge these, and you can parry these. You can parry, but you have to parry all three. You can't just parry the first one. You have to parry all three of them in order to get your pistol shot, which doesn't happen in this sequence, but you do get that later on. And coming from somebody that played on Angel of Death difficulty, I want to give you guys some tips. Some of the tips that I have for Angel of Death difficulty probably won't apply to lower because enemy HPs will be different. You'll be able to sustain a lot more in combat. What I found was that dealing with ranged is probably one of the hardest things to do in combat, especially when you have smaller enemies around and just hordes of them. So try to deal with the ranged as the horde is coming towards you, and then focus on the horde once they get up in your face, because they're going to be what plenishes your shield. The reason I say this is because if you focus on the range, the horde that you get will chip you down in a matter of seconds if you're trying to just outrun them. You also need to kind of get a loadout, is what I found works best. I enjoyed the heavy bolt pistol because it did a lot of damage and was really good at range, and it had good sustainability throughout a fight. So I used that to take out a lot of the ranged enemies. And the Melta rifle I used to take out the horde in front of me because it has so much damage and piercing. So it just goes through and can eliminate a lot of the enemies that you have surrounding you. Another thing about the Melta rifle is that it has the capability of stunning enemies, which none of your strikes on Angel of Death do until really late in the game. So a combo I found that worked was to melt a large enemy, get him stunned, hit him a few times, and then use the Melta again once they recover from their stun. Another thing to pay attention to is environmental hazards, because Saber Interactive put environment hazards in places to stop enemies from coming towards you. So you can shoot them, blow them up at range to stop some ranged enemies. You have to look for those to eliminate a lot of your chip damage. On Angel of Death difficulty, a large enemy with their version of a shotgun will take 3/4 of your health if you get hit with all of the pellets. And they do it from a long distance. It's not point blank range. They will avoid you and make it very difficult. And they seem to be extremely accurate at doing it. Now onto the bugs. Not the Tyranids, not those filthy Xenos. I'm talking about the bugs in the game. One of the bugs that we encountered on my playthrough last night was a certain scene in the second mission. If you died in that scene, or in that area, the pickups that you get, resources, start to stop being, you stop being able to pick them up. And the enemies would shoot right through cover. So all the solid cover that you think you have doesn't function, and they have snipers, and they have different enemies that will just melt you, and you can't do anything about it because you've got to focus on the objective. So that area took us like alone took us 2 hours to complete because of how difficult the game mode is on Angel of Death, and because we were just dealing with bugs. That's the only section in the game that I experienced a ton of bugs. Right now they're having infinite loading issues which I have experienced, and their only resolution at this point is to restart your game. They're having controller issues on PC as well. They have some fixes for those about going into your properties, disabling certain settings, but I did mouse and key. Going back a little bit onto my tips, I recommend that you change your parry on mouse and key to something that's a little bit more accessible. I think it's normally on C. I changed mine to the 6 key on my mouse, so that way I could use my mouse as well. The other thing about the combat is they don't teach you that a lot of the moves are parryable. As you saw with the whip enemy, I parried one of his moves, didn't get the pistol shot, parried a different one, and then got the pistol shot. Enemies have multiple attacks. You have to parry multiple of those attacks if it's a sequence. So if it's a 1, 2, 3 hit, you have to parry all 3. You can't just parry the first one and be done. You have to be parrying every single move. They don't teach you that, and we found this out a lot later, but hopefully this helps you. Right now, I will be playing the Operations and the Eternal War over the next few days on Twitch. If you guys would drop a subscribe, like if you learned anything, if you found it helpful, leave a comment. I'd greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you guys out there.